In the old days, racing games were all about, turning left and right as quickly as possible and avoiding oil slicks.
We probably should show it so it's not stock car racing.
It's just a little bit different, but I mean, it boils down to the same thing. You're racing. It's a challenge against yourself.
Fast forward to today, you can get into a race server with Dale Jr., and I might have that ability to go door to door with them in the real world.
The EA Sports 500.
We want to be the simulation fun experience.
Guys like, man, I've been practicing for a month for this one lap.
But those times come and go very quickly. How am I going to deliver the fun next?
Every 3 years, you could do so much more than you could 3 years before. What more can we do?
So what do I love about video games? So there's a lot of things I love about video games.
Video games take us everywhere we ever wanted to go.
It's escapism. It gives you a sense of competition and achievement.
Bill Elliott's NASCAR Challenge. I couldn't find a better hobby at the time as a kid.
Pole position, hard driving, Daytona, USA.
Living out a real-world race car driver.
That's what I want to do.
You got to the point where you really started believing. That was really the kind of most magical moment for me.
I can remember my dad specifically being angry at me that I was spending too much time fooling around with these video games and needed to get my butt out in the shop and work on the real cars. Thank goodness he was wrong.
When we started iRacing, we wanted to create the most authentic racing simulation that we could. You go back into 2003 and 2004 when we're talking about starting this company, we weren't starting from scratch in a lot of the systems that we used. We had the luxury of 20 years of development.
I've been with iRacing since the beginning. It was a small group of us, pretty much that core group going back to that day. Also worked together previously at a company called Papyrus Racing Games. That was where this all began, where Dave started the code base that still is our foundational piece to this day.
I'm an early adopter of computers. I mean, I'm dating myself, but I got my first computer in 1977. I was always interested in playing games on a computer and programming them, actually, to play games. And, growing up in Indiana, I was a natural-born race fan. As luck would have it, Papyrus sort of grew out of an Indy 500 game. It was the first game that we did. It's ridiculously primitive, but at the time, in 1987, there really weren't any oval racing games at all. So I set out to try to kind of just show you what would it be like to race at Indianapolis.
Saw a tiny ad in the newspaper, game programmer wanted. That's how I joined Papyrus.
Rich Garcia was our first hire at Papyrus. He was one of our best hires ever.
After the IndyCar game was done, it was successful, we were wondering what should we follow up with? And we were kind of looking around to different races and sports, and one of them that stood out was NASCAR. We didn't really at the time understand the NASCAR market, but it surprised us how popular NASCAR was and that we had this feeling that there was this underserved group that wasn't getting games made for them. That was really the origin of NASCAR race in 1994.
The original Papyrus NASCAR game, this sold more than 1 million units in '94 and really kind of put us on the map.
When I heard that Papyrus was going to release a NASCAR game for PC, I think I was 15 years old. I had the old Thrustmaster wheel, like the original Thrustmaster, and I'm in my house. I remember that feeling. I'm putting my computer on a desk and I'm putting the wheel. This can't happen fast enough. Like, I can't get it together quick enough because this is gonna be the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life. And it was. God, it was amazing.
NASCAR 1994. That changed my life. I was only 9 or 10 years old, and I would stay up nights till 2 or 3 in the morning and running it, and I just thought it was the coolest thing ever. That was my first opportunity where I could run laps around Darlington. I could run laps around Atlanta. I learned so many different moves and the basics of racing as a driver off of that. I owe a lot of my success in motorsports to that video game getting me started.
In the computer world, a bit is, a 0 or a 1, an on or an off, one of 2 simple states in the world. So if you collect 8 of them together, then you've got, it turns out, 2 to the 8th, or 256 different patterns that you can represent. And that is a byte. And if you collect 2 of those bytes together, you can have numbers that are 2 to the 16th in size, which is, plus or minus 32,000. It's like, who would need anything more than that, really? So now we're using 64-bit computers. Like we would joke in math, it's uncountably finite. And that is what computers are built on.
At its core, a bit is a very simple concept. It's really on or off. And it's really hard to believe that this concept of on and off can be combined into ultimately the technology for making the NASCAR race in 1994. My team at the time was responsible for developing online racing where you can compete against people across the US. Call up the telephone company and you're saying like, okay, we've got this tiny office, but we want to bring in 32 phone lines. And they're wondering like, oh, are you going to have like a support staff or anything like that? It's like, no, we're working on video games.
You had to call to Massachusetts, not collect. And I'm living with my brother. I'm calling on this modem to log into the servers, and I'm racing, and I'm like, that's a real person in front of me. I couldn't wrap my brain around this. How's this possible? But this is great, I'm doing it. And the bill for the first month was $400. Our phone bill was like $20, right? And now it's $400. And my brother's like, what in the hell is this? I'm like, man, I've been racing online, and it probably played a role in me getting fired from my job, but it filled some void. I don't know what that void was, but I couldn't get enough. It was all I wanted to do all day long.
The computer game industry is very difficult to make a simulation because there's so much pressure to just say, oh, make it accessible, make it fun.
Back in, the 80s and 90s in PC gaming, there were some real technical hurdles to overcome because every computer had a different sound card, a different video card, different types of monitors. Console, drop a disc in, put a cartridge in, you're off and running. So when EA Sports came to NASCAR, it was a big deal.
We have been making the Madden and college football games for years, and we're pretty darn good at console development. So when we had the opportunity to work on NASCAR, we were the first console game to have 43 cars racing on the track. We were the first console game to offer alternate car skins, which was no small feat to do on a PlayStation and the original Xbox. We just turned up the dial on realism because after all, that's what EA Sports is all about. If it's in the game, it's in the game.
EA wants to be in our sport. All of us took a lot of pride in that. It made us all feel like superstars.
EA Sports, it's in the game.
Papyrus were the masters of NASCAR, but when they told us that EA was also entering the NASCAR space, that was the most terrifying call I had.
The guys that did it before, obviously they made great games and they showed EA that there was a business to be had there. But EA always comes into a market to innovate and change the landscape of the market itself.
What was special about NASCAR was all of the teams and the drivers were very much into it.
We run with a fast crowd, paint traders.
You often don't get that hands-on with the folks that are in the game. We've got a lot of football players in Madden. We don't go get hands-on with those football players. But frankly, it was a great, great partnership across the board. NASCAR, EA Sports, and the teams and drivers. And I think it yielded a great product.
This makes me feel like it's my game.
You know what I mean?
One of the biggest decisions I made at EA was we had Dale Jr. as a cover guy. There are drivers and then there's Dale Jr. And that's just the plain truth. So when we had the EA Sports 500 at Talladega, we would always have contests where fans could play throughout the weekend and the best fans got to race against Dale Jr.
One of the guys that I raced at Talladega was Derek Wood, who I would become friends with in the iRacing world.
I got the game like as soon as I possibly could and started practicing at home. So I won this competition amongst all the fans. I was super nervous. The controller was like shaking in my hands or whatever, but I just kept focusing on that screen and beat him to win the 10,000, which was a dream come true.
When Derek beat me, that made me realize like people were going to be dedicating a lot of their time to doing this and doing it well.
I think me and Derek, we're pretty competitive. Yeah. And we know how to race without spinning each other out. So.
The whole sport had a ton of growth back then, and EA Sports was a big part of that. I mean, it just blows my mind to think about where this all was 20 years ago and where we are today, where we have like, the graphics are so real, sometimes you can't tell the difference between video game footage and the real thing.
If you remember the old televisions with the NTSC, I mean, almost all the games were 320 by 200 pixels, which fits in 2 to the 16th bytes. So it was a sort of a natural video mode, 320 by 200. Generally, you could get 16 colors, so there were 4 bits per pixel. And some modes even allowed 256 colors. Now, they've gotten to the point where the colors are stored as floating point numbers, and there will be a red, green, blue, usually an alpha channel. So there's just vast increase in the number of colors, and then the resolutions now are, 4K by 4K or even more. I feel old. I mean, it's astonishing, really.
I know the iRacing guys used to be the Papyrus guys, so they're royalty in my eyes. So I would try to help them with information and data and horsepower and drag and all the things, trying to help that simulation be as good as it can be, because I'm just a selfish customer that wants it to be fun and great.
I remember one time where we kind of got him into some hot water, I think, because we needed to get access to a Chevy when the COT came out. And so he said, great, yeah, I'll get one to my shop. You guys get down here and get ready to take the photographs and laser scan it.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of didn't tell everybody who what was going on. I asked my crew chief, who is my cousin, if I could use a car, and he knew why I was using it.
His '88 car, got rolled out of a trailer into the shop, and you could see the looks on all of the faces of the Junior Motorsports guys that they saw this car coming into the shop, and they knew that they did not want to have anything to do with it because they knew this was probably not a good idea.
Now, Hendrick Motorsports wasn't aware of why we were using the car or why the car was here, but I knew where the information was going and who it was going to and that it was going to be safe, but I couldn't convince everyone of that, and I didn't waste my time trying. So I borrowed the car, got it scanned, we put it into iRacing, the information disappeared, and Hendrick was none the wiser, and nobody got in trouble, at least till now.
So a laser scan essentially is a device, kind of like a camera, that spins around and it takes a picture of the surroundings. But it's not exactly a picture. It's little three-dimensionally placed dots that are so close together, when you back up, it looks like a solid surface. And they're measured positionally from the laser scanner to where they are in the real world as it's spinning around. So you are basically taking a complete three-dimensional digital picture, precise and accurate to within the millimeter, really. We want what we're doing to be like racing in the real world.
A network television first. A NASCAR All-Star race from the virtual Homestead Miami Speedway. The NASCAR Pro Invitational delivered by iRacing. All right, folks, we know this is not real racing. Sure wish it was on a Sunday.
I think that it was amazing that all the things lined up as far as the drivers were into it, and the fact that the simulation and the software is as advanced as it is today. All those things sort of met in the middle, and we needed it.
There was no contract signs. There was no money changed hands. Everyone checked their egos at the door and said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to have 2 hours of entertainment for these fans.
No doubt that the COVID-19 shutdown brought new race fans to our sport. Those that said, hey, you know what? I have more time to participate in events like this, and took it up as a new hobby. So I think that there's a model being developed where there's very intense simulation with very intense realism. And then there's a model that has kind of split off of that, which is, hey, this should still be fun.
Just tell me when, I'll just keep playing. It's a part of my job. The goal is make something high-end be fun. With the next NASCAR product, definitely these two worlds have a full place to coexist. The sim racing on PC was accessible only on PC because of that hardware capability. But with the next-gen consoles, you're able to start bringing those authentic elements of how good, let's say, the physics are or their environment around you is because of that enhanced capability of those new consoles. That was not possible before. And I'm not talking about just make better-looking graphics. That's exciting. But there's more different elements to inspire the user to enter the exciting world of NASCAR.
Rocket League is a video game that combines soccer with rocket-powered cars. We're super excited about being able to bring our game to NASCAR and the new free-to-play audience, where really you're keeping your game fresh and new, each and every month with new content and new drops. Not just creating a game once every year and releasing it, but instead having these beats throughout the NASCAR season. So it's really a fun experience, trying to figure out the best ways to give both the Rocket League players and the NASCAR fans an opportunity to interact across this next generation of video gaming.
What the future is going to be is, how does the video game experience become a medium of entertainment for people who didn't even know they were gamers? There are 3 billion mobile gamers in the world. And if you look at Real Racing 3, it looked like a console game in your pocket. So when you talk about mobile, you talk about get the entertainment to the people who want it, how they want to digest it. Whether they're playing for 30 seconds or 30 hours, it's still an engaging experience.
I've seen the whole thing, from having to go to the arcade to play, to having it in your home. And here I am, 46 years old, and as geeked out about going and getting on my sim rig and racing all night till 2 in the morning as I was when I first set that PC up for Papyrus Racing. Some things you love, and that love fades. You find something else. The hobbies, they come and go. But for whatever reason, man, this one has got its hooks in me.
Every time I do a game, I'm interested in making the most realistic game possible, but I still have not made a game that really captures everything that's there. And that's one of the things that really gets me excited about the future, because I know how much further we have to go. There's no end.
The computer that took men to the moon, I think they had 4K of RAM in it. And now you can fit almost an entire library on a chip the size of your thumbnail. I mean, that's how it keeps my interest. There's always new stuff to learn. And, we're getting to a point where racing games look like a real race broadcast, so what more can we do? I don't know. We'll figure out something.
For more great NASCAR on Fox content, subscribe to our channel. It's somewhere right around here.